Hi, and welcome to another GDR Objectified field trip. Today we find ourselves in Berlin, capital of the German Democratic Republic, specifically in the district of Friedrichshain, one of the corners of the newly reunited German capital, which still manages to evoke the East quite nicely on occasion. The focus of our field trip today will be this somewhat nondescript office building behind me. It's hard to imagine now, but back in the day, this was one of the epicenters of SED power in the German Democratic Republic, as this building housed the party's official organ, Neues Deutschland, or New Germany. As you can see by the sign on the roof, they're still in there today. From the earliest days of the communist project under Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, party leaders placed great importance on agitation and propaganda, seeing these as important tools in winning the battle for the hearts and minds of the people whom they would rule. GDR leaders were no exception to this. In fact, there was a maxim in the party that said, journalism is the strongest weapon of the party. And this goes some ways to explaining the rigid supervision and control that the party exercised over all media in the GDR. The paper was founded in 1946 in the wake of the forced union of the Social Democratic Party and the Communist Party in the Soviet zone of occupation. The name Neues Deutschland, or New Germany, was meant to reflect the official Soviet line at the time on post-war Germany. It held that the German nation should be united, but under the values or principles of socialism and anti-fascism, hence the name New Germany. Now, in the 1970s, when the GDR officially turned away from that position, moving and agitating for coexistence and the recognition of the two German states, party people began to refer to the paper by its initials, ND, a sort of rhetorical workaround that managed to avoid the somewhat uncomfortable anachronistic name of the official party paper. Neues Deutschland moved into this building in 1972, and at that time the square that it was built on was renamed after Franz Mehring. He was a Marxist journalist in the early 20th century, and at the end of World War II, together with Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg, founded the Spartacist Bund, a left-wing political organization. This bronze statue of Mehring here was erected in 1978 and was created by Heinrich Appel. I enjoy this statue greatly, not the least of which because it appears that the good man is holding a smartphone. On closer inspection, it appears to be a tract of some sort, but still, it does make me smile. At its peak, Neues Deutschland boasted a circulation of 1.1 million copies daily. Not bad for a country of 16.5 million people. Don't read this as a sign that the paper was overly informative or fun to read. Neues Deutschland was known for its dry, turgid reportage and often gave over its pages for word-for-word reprints of speeches by important party leaders. There was a saying in a quote in a propaganda song from the early years of the GDR that went, the party, comrades, the party is always right, and so it shall remain. If you were a comrade and wanted to know what that week or day's version of always right was, you read Neues Deutschland. Neues Deutschland was not really known for its graphic design, pleasure that it provided the eye. However, insofar as photos were included, they tended to be of the party leader of the day, either Walter Ulbricht or Erich Honecker. Apparently this reached its peak in March 1987 in an issue dedicated to the opening of the Leipzig Spring Trade Fair, in which Honecker's picture was featured no less than 43 times. I have an issue of Neues Deutschland from January 1989. Sadly, mine only includes 2 pictures of Honecker, but more importantly, it includes what would become famous last words, essentially. This came out January 20th, 1989, and I was living in West Berlin at the time. I remember the West Berlin papers quoting Honecker from this speech because in it, he basically said, the wall will remain in place as long as the conditions which caused its construction are still present. If that's 50 years, 100 years, it doesn't matter. The wall will remain. All right, let's take a minute now to explore the building, and in particular the artwork that's found on the grounds here around it. Immediately adjacent to the main entrance on the left-hand side, there are two terracotta pillars, and these honor the memory of Karl Liebknecht and Mathilde Jacob. Liebknecht, of course, is fairly well known, but Jacob was also a member of the Spartacus League, and she is integral in that she smuggled Rosa Luxemburg's letters out of prison during the latter's incarceration during World War I. Both of these sculptures were created by Ingeborg Hunzinger. There is, of course, also a bronze statue of Luxemburg herself. This is a work by Rolf Biebel. And then, on the facade of the building, there are three quotes. One from Luxemburg, one from Peter Weiss, a playwright and Marxist thinker, and Karl Marx. The Luxemburg quote reads, "The only path to rebirth is the school of public life itself, a broad-based democracy without restraints on public opinion." The Marx quote, which was chosen, is, "The social revolution will find its poetry in the future, not in the past." Now, you would be forgiven for thinking that all these artworks, these quotes on the building, would be relics from the GDR period, but you would be wrong. They, of course, reflect the more utopian strain of socialism that was largely under attack for the entire period of the GDR. Its leadership wasn't interested in the more idealistic notions of socialism pushed by some of its supporters. But one of the reasons that I like to come to this building here is because, for me, it does still embody the East German value system. Certainly not the mainstream value system, which is ironic given that this was the official party organ. But Neues Deutschland has really morphed post-unified Germany into that spokesperson or speaking institution of that more idealized version of socialism. About a week before I traveled to Germany, a debate erupted when the leader of the Young Social Democrats, the youth wing of one of West Germany's traditional two main parties, gave an interview in the leading newspaper in which he suggested that the economic disparities that have emerged in Germany, in particular since unification, needed to be addressed with more rigor, and that no policy options should be off the table. And this would include nationalization or handing control of key industries, including, he suggested, the auto industry, to its workers and managers. He wasn't making any demands. He was simply suggesting that the discussion of how the German social market economy could be made to work for more of its citizens needed to go beyond the somewhat blinkered debate that has been going on. This ignited a firestorm of controversy across the political spectrum, all the way to what many would characterize as the far left. Interestingly, Neues Deutschland has been making those arguments basically uninterrupted for the past 30 years. And so it was interesting to see them get some play. At one point, some commentators were suggesting that the leader of the youth wing of the Social Democrats was trying to turn the SPD into the SAD, so the Socialist Party of Germany into the Socialist Unity Party, which gives another sense of just what a taboo the East German era remains in the unified German system. In July 1953, Neues Deutschland found itself in the news as opposed to just reporting on it. At that time, its editor-in-chief, Rudolf Herrnstadt, was sacked by leader Walter Ulbricht in the aftermath of the workers' uprising in June 1953. Herrnstadt, who had been reporting favorably on the dissatisfaction amongst workers, was made a scapegoat when Ulbricht reasserted his power. Another interesting Neues Deutschland-related tidbit is that Günter Schabowski, the man who announced the opening of the Berlin Wall on November 9, 1989, was a former editor-in-chief of the paper. Another reason I love to visit this building is that it's one of the last places you'll find a Paternoster, two-person, continuously moving elevator. Fantastic. So while I like coming here and seeing Neues Deutschland, an embodiment of the former GDR in some ways, it's very much questionable how much longer this will in fact be the case. From a circulation height of 1.1 million issues in the mid-80s, Neues Deutschland is now down to under 25,000 copies, 25,000 subscribers. They derive less than 10% of their income from advertising, and the average age of their reader is over 60 years old. So traditional media are under attack everywhere, but Neues Deutschland is really on its last legs. Interestingly, though, it's still half owned by the successor party of the SED, Die Linke, the left party, and a French-based investment fund. And the plot of land that it sits on is extremely desirable central Berlin real estate. And so it would appear that its days are numbered. Somewhat ironic that a newspaper dedicated to the overthrow of capitalism would itself fall victim to that system, but that does seem to be where this is inexorably leading. From Friedrichshain, Berlin, this has been another GDR Objectified field trip. Thanks for joining us.
It was